All right, so video 3 of the Trojan Saga. We've got the heroes at Troy. We have the beginning of the war. So let's backtrack here a little bit and just give an overview about the Iliad. Homer's famous epic poem is a true epic because it is a story that was repeated by oral tradition for many, many generations. Homer is just one of many poets who actually wrote it down. But Homer's is probably considered our biggest source of not just the Trojan Saga, but much of Greek mythology that we've talked about this semester is found within the pages of the Iliad. Now it's called the Iliad because it's a tale of Ilium, or otherwise known as Troy. So with the Iliad, we want to keep in mind that the scope of Homer's narrative is fairly narrow. It is 47 days in the 10th year of the war. So the poem begins and ends in the 10th year of the war. It begins with an argument between Agamemnon and Achilles, and it ends with the death of Hector, the Prince of Troy. So there are some definite limitations, and we have to go outside of the Iliad to get the resolution of the war itself. However, many people actually say that rather than it being an Iliad or a tale of Ilium, it's actually an Achillead, a tale of Achilles. Sorry about that. Achilles. Homer's poem, is a what we could catalog as a moral tragedy, because the wrath of Achilles is basically how he brings disaster upon himself and even his allies. His anger, Achilles' anger, is his tragic flaw. But as a hero, he has his other good attributes, his passion, his honor, two of the biggest ones. But anger is his tragic flaw. And remember, the concept of honor and the Greek concept of a heroic warrior is that Achilles has made a choice to have a short life full of distinction over a long life full of no distinction or honor. And also keep in mind that the ideal Greek hero does get divine help. So we'll talk about some of the heroes who have that divine help and some of them who don't. And while we might think, wow, they accomplished that without the help of a god or goddess, that actually didn't give them an edge. Heroes like Achilles, who did have the aid of a god or goddess, were perhaps even more so admired. The Homeric tradition has a cast of typological characters and typological action. It is kind of formulaic. So the types or character types that we might see would be like the ideal hero, the crafty aging warrior, the wise counselor, the young and reckless heroes. You will find the pattern of the retiring hero. Now, this is retiring different from someone retiring from a job. They actually kind of quit for a while, and then they come back into the action. All right, guys, Stella can't decide if she wants in or out during the recording. So anyway, that's where these pauses, if you can actually hear them or tell where they are, that's what that was. She wanted out. I let her out. She wants in. I let her in. It's kind of crazy. All right. Anyway, the retiring hero often leaves the action, but he's very important. He has to come back. Achilles is also a tragic and epic hero because of his flaws, his tragic end, so on. Okay. So the major characters of the Iliad. Homer tends to give extended development to the characters he considers to be deserving of praise and limited development of the characters that he doesn't see as being deserving of praise. So the ones that you see the most limited portraits of would be Paris and Helen. Of course, they're kind of responsible for this. Andromache, who is Hector's wife, and Aeneas, who's another prince of Troy. But remember, he gets his own epic poem in the Aeneid in Roman mythology. So, you know, I'm pretty sure he's not too concerned about Homer's portrayal of him. The major Achaean or Greek characters, again, are type of characters that fit Homer's purpose. So again, wise counselor, aged hero, rash young warrior, you know, those kind of things. The exception, though, is Homer's characterization of Agamemnon. He, according to Homer, is not deserving of praise, but he does spend a good bit of time developing his character in terms of why he is not deserving of praise. He is portrayed as incompetent and fearful, and ultimately an adversary of Achilles, who is Homer's true hero of the war. But some of the other characters that are deserving of honor and a great deal of development are these heroes: Aias, or Ajax, son of Telamon, and Odysseus. We will call Ajax, son of Telamon, just Ajax. He is a first cousin of Achilles, and he is second only to Achilles in terms of his warrior status and accomplishments. But keep in mind, Ajax fights without the aid of divine intervention. He has not been protected by the waters of the river Styx. He does not have gods and goddesses on his side. Right? So we might think Ajax is actually better. But anyway, he is second only to Achilles. And then Odysseus, he is an accomplished orator. He is straightforward in his persuasion. He is able to keep his passions under control, which is a direct opposite to Achilles. And he never loses sight of the ultimate purpose, which is to destroy Troy. And, I mean, getting Helen back is great, but he's really focused on destroying Troy. Now, some of the other heroes that are developed, you have Diomedes, right? We saw him later on in Heracles' saga. But Diomedes is one of the youngest and one of the mightiest warriors of the Greeks. He's a favorite of Athena, and in many ways he's portrayed as a lesser Achilles. He is so accomplished on the battlefield that he is actually able to inflict wounds on Ares and Aphrodite, because the gods and goddesses get out there in the mix and aid their favorites, right? So he's able to actually wound Ares and Aphrodite, and he's also credited as being very quick thinking. Nestor, on the other hand, is the oldest and most respected of the counselors amongst the Greeks. He's calm, he's patient, he's very fatherly in his manner, and he gives advice freely. He's a peacemaker, of the quarrels that occur amongst themselves. Remember, these men have been camped out here waging war for 10 years, so things are going to get heated at times, even amongst themselves. And when Diomedes is unable to convince Achilles to rejoin the battle, which we'll get to that in a second, Nestor is the one who steps in and tries after Diomedes fails. The last one is Aias, or Ajax the Locrian, or the Lesser Ajax. So we will call him Lesser Ajax all the time, so you can keep him separate from the worthy Ajax. The Lesser Ajax is violent, and you will see that he gets into quite a bit of trouble at the end of the battle. After the Iliad is over, and he is the one who drags Cassandra out of Athena's temple and rapes her, and has to have his family pay for that crime for 1,000 years. So we'll get to that later, but that's the Lesser Ajax. So you have Ajax, son of Telamon, he's the good one, and then you have the Lesser Ajax. Now, our major Trojan characters are the sons of Priam, Paris, and Hector. Now, Paris, remember, is his shepherd name. His princely name is Alexandros, which means warlike or champion. And he has regained his princely rank after he was given up to exposure because, again, he was recognized by his sister through his prowess at a military contest. He's kind of generally known as a pretty boy, kind of woman crazy. He's a warrior, however, he is not eager to engage in war. So that's a big fault. Hector, on the other hand, is Paris's brother, and he is a champion of Troy. He has many great accomplishments on the battlefield, and he is feared by the Greeks. He accomplishes things with the aid of the gods, so very similar to Achilles. And in fact, when he kills Patroclus, Achilles' protege, he is able to do so with aid from the gods. Hector is also a good husband and father, and he's full of care for his family. The destiny of Troy and most of Troy's wealth is in his hands. When he does eventually fight Achilles, he fights because he has to, otherwise he would be called a coward. And when he's killed by Achilles, the Trojans know that they will eventually fall. The women of Troy include Hecuba, the queen, Priam's wife. She is portrayed as a sorrowful mother. In the end, at the fall of Troy, she is given to Odysseus as a concubine, and she is sorrowful because her whole family has been wiped out by a stupid war. Andromache is Hector's wife. She is given a premonition of her husband's fate, so she is very reluctant for her husband to fight, and that actually does not earn her any credit according to Homer, right? He fulfills his fate in spite of his wife's protests. And of course you have Helen. She is shown as a beautiful woman, but she is a victim of her beauty, and in fact she suffers because of it. She feels great guilt for what is happening to Troy. She is very conscious of the Trojans' hate for her because she is the one responsible for this 10-year siege. And in fact, she condemns herself more than Priam or Hector does, the king and the prince of Troy. In many ways, she's depicted as a victim of the gods and of Paris, because remember, it was his idea. The Olympian gods are also characters in the story because they do play a part in the battles, but also they are an important part of many of the behind-the-scenes kinds of things that happen both before the Iliad as well as after. All right, so I think we will kind of stop there because we'll be getting more into Achilles and some of the crucial events of the Iliad, and then we'll get into the end of the war, which takes place again after the Iliad's conclusion.